Welcome to Marketing Mistakes and How to Avoid Them. I'm Stacy Jones, the founder of influencer marketing and product placement agency Hollywood Branded. I created this podcast series to provide brand marketers a learning platform for top experts to share their insights and knowledge on topics which make a direct impact on your business today. I truly understand as an agency owner and brand marketer that it is impossible to be well versed on every topic and strategy that can improve bottom line results. My goal is to help you avoid making costly mistakes of time, energy, or money along the pathway to bettering your brand, whether you are doing a DIY approach or hiring an expert to help. Let's begin today's discussion.
Welcome to Marketing Mistakes and How to Avoid Them. Here's your host, Stacy Jones.
I am so happy to be here with you all today, and I want to give a very warm welcome to Dave Rohrer, who's joining us to discuss his over 20 years of experience in marketing and consulting. As an in-house and agency digital leader, Dave has solved problems and increased revenue for companies of all sizes, from Retailer 100 and Fortune 500 to small, local, and startup businesses. Dave is the co-host of the Business of Digital podcast and runs Chicago-based digital agency Northside Metrics. Dave's an internationally recognized speaker and can be found sharing his digital marketing wisdom at conferences like PubCon Pro, Midwest Digital Marketing Conference, and the Craft Brewers Conference. Today, we're going to talk about what brands need to know before you hire an agency. We're going to learn what's worked from Dave's experience, what maybe could be avoided, and where other brands are missing the mark. Dave, welcome.
Thank you.
Well, super happy to have you here today. And if you want to start off, tell us a little bit about how long you've been doing what you do, about your background, where you were at, and what got you to where you're doing what you do today.
Chaos is probably the story in how I got to where I'm at. Started as a web developer, was tired of being told by marketing people who didn't know how the web worked, how to do marketing and conversion marketing and stuff. So I ended up switching to SEO, spent about 10 years in-house SEO for SaaS solutions, publishers, a couple other kind of small companies here and there. And I've also spent about 10 years either consulting or at agencies where I've worked at really large. You've probably, everyone that's shopped or is listening has probably shopped at least at one of the stores or companies I've worked at, from really large retailers to really large producers of tech in your house, perhaps your car. And I've kind of seen it all. I've worked with really small startups with really small teams, but I've also worked with really large companies where their internal teams had never talked to each other, yet we're in the same building and sometimes less than 100 feet away from each other. And it's really amazing how that, even in the recent years, is still going on. So yeah, kind of worked all over the place and done a lot of different things.
Well, I'm very glad to have you on, because what triggered me wanting to have you here today is the fact that you have worked so many different places and you've worked with so many different brands, so many different agencies over that time. And you have honed in on the fact that sometimes brands don't really know what to do and what they're doing when they hire an agency. And there's some major hurdles that they need to get over in order to make sure those partnerships are started. And I'd love to talk to you about that, about why brands are looking for agencies, what issues there are about starting working with them, what their expectations, misconceptions are, anything along those lines.
They usually hire an agency to be a silver bullet. They hire an agency or some sort of third party to fix their creative issues, to fix their website, to help them with their brand issues. They don't want to talk about that they might have issues with their product or customer service, but it's a marketing thing and we can fix it with marketing. Or we have a website and it really doesn't do well in Google, so we're just going to redo it and we're not going to talk to anyone about it. So we're just going to hire an agency because we're not quite sure why. Whatever that problem is, you internally just have either roadblocks or there's just chaos of people not agreeing. So you go and get a third party to kind of tell you what to do. The biggest thing I see is that they go and get this agency and then they think they're done. They think that this is the silver bullet, they're going to fix all of our problems, and they really don't think through what the goals are, how they can leverage that agency, how they can work with that agency, and that agency is probably going to give them more work than they ever imagined to do to fix these things. Especially when it comes to your digital marketing, your SEO, your PPC, your social media. Suddenly you're being asked to create all sorts of content. either for the website or for Facebook, or, now we're getting on Instagram and we need our graphic designers to do lots of work and lots of video. And it needs to tie into all these campaigns. And now we have to have meetings to talk about how we tie in all these campaigns into the work that this agency is doing. And we thought we were just going to tell the agency to do X, Y, Z.
And we see that ourselves so often, where not only are we, kind of expected to do X, Y, Z and create a miracle, but we're not necessarily allocated budgets, because the solution is hire the agency and magic will happen, not, oh, now we need to actually allocate dollars to make that happen as well. Is that something that you see quite a bit?
Yeah, and I've started asking this question up front: what are your resources? Mm-hmm. So whatever the project is or whatever the scope is that we might be talking about, what resources do you have? Do you have budget for Facebook? Do you have budget for any sort of social ads? Do you have budget for Google and Bing ads? Are you active anywhere? What are you doing with direct mail? What are you doing with influencer outreach? Do you have a social team? Do you have writers? Do you have external writers, developers? What resources do you have in your marketing, in your dev, any sort of stack, that you have? What do you have, and what works for you? What doesn't? How can I fit into that? Because, like you just said, they want a miracle, and then you start running into, oh, well, we hired you and now we don't have budget to do that.
Yep. A lot of times the agency is the budget.
Yes. And it was not planned.
No, because the agency thinks that they're being brought in to do all these different things that they're going to ideate and scope and plan for and open doors for and execute upon, but dollars are still needed. Yeah.
And the biggest thing I stress is, before you talk to an agency to do whatever you're going to need help with, do a full-on internal audit of all of your people, of all of your resources. If you're going to be doing a site migration or changing from a CMS or changing your email provider, and you're looking to talk to a consultant to help you with your email funnels, why would you bring them in before you switch to make sure that they understand the new platform you're moving on to and that they're actually an expert in that? Not hire an expert on the current platform and then they go, well, I've never worked with that new platform. Because I've seen that type of thing happen time and time again.
Yeah, I absolutely get that. And then you mentioned something also about internal issues. I know a lot of brands think that an agency is going to be able to solve the problem of two owners or a marketing team or the executive board not necessarily all being on the same page. But when you hire an agency and everyone's still internally all over the place, that's not really the best solution either.
No, and the larger the company, the more time you need to allocate as an agency, the more time you need to allocate, more resources, more meeting time to have with people and other stakeholders that are not the ones that actually define and are over your budget. The number of times where we've had to put together point of POVs and decks and sales decks for internal projects that we were trying to get through to other teams and basically make sure that we understood what their goals were so that we could make sure that those were then mentioned and covered in our deck to show that this project was not going to just be a time sink or a resource sink for their budget, because their budget is different, their goals are different, everything is different, to make sure that our project would align or at least support their goals. And yeah, it can go crazy. I know someone that was doing, trying to drive a lot of traffic and a lot of views to this really cool video that had been produced by this other team. And they went to the PR team and said, hey, you guys, every time you push stuff out, every time you guys are doing X, Y, Z, you're pushing people over to this YouTube area, not our own page. And what they ended up finding out was that team bonus and everything that all of their goals were aligned with was YouTube views, not anything that it was even remotely close to what they were trying to do. So they got no support.
Hopefully they got lots of YouTube views.
Hopefully, but it wasn't even there. So yeah, right. That's the kind of internal stuff that you can shoot yourself in the foot with when teams are just not aligned.
Right. We also have seen agencies be hired by brands to cover a multitude of different topics. So the brand's new, they're launching, they'll go out and they want a PR agency and they want a web agency and they get all of these different agencies, but they don't necessarily act as the cohesive unit to actually bring all those agencies together, and they just magically think it's going to happen.
Yes. They never once let them know that they're working with other teams. Mm-hmm. They never once share the campaign and what's going on. From an SEO standpoint or PPC or, social media, it's like if there's anything going on and then you're trying to run like someone's showing up on Good Morning America or some show, and all these other teams and all these other agencies all think that the date is next Sunday or next Saturday, or they don't even know, and the lead time is given by 2 weeks or 1 week. And they're like, well, you already have all these deliverables. We already have all these plans. What do you want to do? And that's probably another thing, is just the changing of priorities for an agency.
Right.
And scope creep, not just on a project, but on the entire partnership.
Sure.
Of, here's the contract, and 3 months in, that project goes away, or the scope and there was a stakeholder meeting, or there was a quarterly meeting and we're not meeting goals, or maybe we've exceeded goals and now we don't need so much love and attention on this project, but we need to go over here. But you've just directed your agency for the last 2 or 3 months to go down this path, and all time and resources has gone down there, and now you're trying to change them and you expect the same results the next week.
Right. And your agency's running around like a chicken with his head cut off, desperately trying to please the client and make sure that they don't kill their employees at the same time.
Yes.
Yes. Very familiar with this, it sounds like, right?
If you're in an agency, yes. And then the other thing along those lines is, when you're an in-house person, if you've never worked at an agency, and I got to see this more when I worked on the other side, when you ask for something, the agency's person, if there's not a project manager or some sort, if it doesn't go to an account manager and they're not a very good account manager, they probably don't do this, or at least they should. When do you need this? What format do you need it? Does this override all other priorities? Like, what is the priority level of this? If you just send off an email and say, hey, take a look at this, and you have a limited budget of deliverables, of time, of energy, of a really tight deadline on something that's supposed to be turned around, where does that fall? Yeah. So often, in-house people wonder why at the end of a month, or halfway through a month, if you have a retainer with an agency or some sort of limited amount of time, budget, whatever it is, that they wonder why halfway through the contract they've run out of stuff.
Right.
And resources from that agency, because the agency is like, well, every month by the 15th, you've given us 5 ad hoc requests and we already have these other projects, so we can't answer anymore.
Yeah.
Scope creep at the agency level. And then you wonder why that budget, and then, nobody wins.
So how should brand managers approach hiring and onboarding an agency better?
I think starting with that internal audit, and understanding what your people and your resources are. What do you have? If you were to hire, someone like you, do they actually have the ability to get some product placement? If you were to do an influencer outreach, do you actually have legal ability to send out your products? Mm-hmm. Do you have the okay? If you're doing, any other type of digital marketing, do you have the resources to possibly implement anything? And if you don't know, think about what projects you could do. If you were not to hire that agency, what projects would you do? If your IT team is not going to let you make changes to the website for the next year, hiring an SEO agency is really not going to do a lot. Because we're going to tell you to do different changes to your website, and you're going to tell us that it's going to be another year before your IT team can do any single change to the website. So why did you just hire me as an SEO agency?
That's fair.
Stakeholders, look beyond your boss, your boss's boss, but look to the other teams, so that when you do bring in projects, you can, make sure and understand what their goals are for this quarter, for this year. And I think you're going to be able to share some of the things I sent along, but it's really imperative when you're thinking about what your personal goals are, Start at the company and work your way down. Start at the company goals. Think about your marketing team, your IT team, your social team, whatever group you are, keep rolling up and then roll down. And think about what all those goals are and what those levers you can work on. And then start to think about where you're short in people and resources. And that's when you start to go, okay, this is the type of agency we need. We need an agency that can help us with X. And that's where we're weak. And this is the one thing we really need. And I think that's like just that whole process of thinking through it rather than we're lacking here.
And so let's say you're a new brand, right? Out of the gate, you haven't really, no consumer's even aware of you quite yet. What is the first agency type that you think a brand should onboard? And then how rapidly should they start onboarding additional agencies before they're really in sync to be able to work with everyone?
I'm an SEO by trade, so of course my answer is going to be, it depends. I literally had this call earlier this week with someone that they have a startup. It's a SaaS solution. They are looking to start. They don't even have a website. They have a product that's almost going to launch, but they have no other marketing, no anything else. Who are you targeting? I think is the very first question to ask is, who are you targeting? Is it a certain decision maker? Are you B2B? Is it B2C? Are you both? And think about who you're targeting and then start working back from how can we get in front of them? Whoever that decision or decision maker is, there might be multiple. How do we get in front of them? And from there, I think it answers the question of what type of agency, who do we reach out to, and where to start? Do you need a website? Yes. Does it just need to be some sort of MVP landing page, maybe with, very simple brochureware? Possibly. Do you need a very elaborate off right from the start, with video and demos and, all sorts of walkthroughs? Maybe, depending on what your product is. But, for a long time, Twitter, as complicated as it was, I don't know if they can get away with it or not, depending on how you want to look at it, but their homepage was very simple. Right. Probably to the detriment, but it was very simple. Now there's a lot of people that can launch a page and it's just coming soon. If you're a startup and you get PR, do you have anything? What if you get on TechCrunch? What if you get on some sort of local or national TV and you don't expect it? Do you have a website or web presence that you can tell people to go to and sign up and get on a waiting list for?
Right. Do you have a media kit? If you want to do if you want to do influencer marketing, we run into brands who are like, oh, we want to do influencer marketing. We want to work with influencers who will post about our brand and help us get sales. And they don't have a website, or they don't quite have a website yet. There's no place for someone to actually purchase the product, or they don't have social media either. They haven't developed an Instagram, a Facebook, whatever it might be. So as these influencers that they're paying to work with, they're not growing their own audience because they don't have any platform to grow from.
Yeah, and you need your own platform. You really need to be active. And I preach that even if you're not going to use it, whenever you're registering your business name, your idea name, your product name, get every social handle you can, get every domain you can. And even if you do nothing but sit on it, just so you have it, please do that. Yeah. Even for new products.
And social media. I mean, if I had gone back in the day and realized that Twitter had a limit on names that you could have, I might have changed our agency name if I thought we were really doing marketing under Twitter, because we can't fit Hollywood Branded in Twitter as a name. So we've had to get really creative with that. Yep. And having social platforms where one of them is Hollywood Branded Inc., one of them is Hollywood Branded, one of them is Hollywood_PR. It changes your whole personality. So that's something big for brands just to think about.
Yeah, we did that when we started the podcast, my podcast. We went through all of the names, and as we were doing it, we were online, both of us, checking to see, can we get the domain? Can we get the social handles before we finalized and stopped arguing about which ones we really liked the most?
Exactly.
It eliminated some options pretty quickly.
Yeah. I mean, it's true. And that's what, it's your calling card, and having that website and having those social platforms. That's where today's people go. I mean, that's the first place anyone looks at your business.
Yeah. Depending on where it is. But yeah, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, your site in Google or, anywhere, even if you're, say, a restaurant or some other business, there's a review site of some sort out there that covers your industry, and most of them allow you to send people to your website. So you need to have one.
100%. So what is the actual time commitment that a brand needs to think about before hiring an agency as well? We've talked about the fact that they have to be involved, but how involved do you think someone needs to determine it's going to be?
Not to say it depends, because that's a bad answer. It's true. But what are they taking on? How often do you have meetings? I've worked with companies where we had a weekly stand-up meeting. We had a weekly scrum meeting. We had a weekly 30-minute meeting where we had a 30-minute prior, and then we had internal others as an agency. I've been an in-house person where we met with our agency once a month, because a lot of it was, let's meet, what's the update? Okay, now go run.
Sure.
But there's other times where things are moving really quickly, and you might need one once a week or even sometimes twice a week.
Right.
Even if it's just a 15-minute check-in on Tuesday to go over the last couple of days, and then a 15-minute on Friday, and it's just, every Friday at 10 a.m., we have a quick stand-up meeting. Is there anything that you guys need from us? Is there anything we need to get you today so that you're not behind next week? Yes, no, we'll prioritize it internally. But at least once a month, I think, just to go over reporting, to go over updates and status reports for, if whoever the account manager, project manager is, should probably be managing that, to give you updates on your overall contract, overall progress towards whatever that campaign, project, contract scope is. But I've also seen places that have way too many meetings.
Mm-hmm.
And I've found some meeting calculators that really scare people. And there's certain plugins online that you can use where it'll plug into your Google Calendar, and it'll tell you the percentage of time that you spend in your day in meetings.
Yeah. I think my Microsoft Office actually sends me a weekly update now on that.
Does it?
Yes. And it tells me also how many times I'm emailing through those meetings.
Aha. Yeah. And the one cool plugin I found before was also talked about how many meetings are just 2 or 3 people, how many are 6 to 8,
right?
How many you called, like how many are recurring. And it was just ridiculous. And I think that also talks to one of the things that I think in-house people should do, especially the larger the company you are. You're almost an agency. I know most in-house people, if you're on a, either the PR team, social team, whatever, you probably have different business lines, stakeholders, services. If you're on the SEO or PPC side, you probably have the same type of thing, depending on who runs the campaign, who owns that service, that product line, business line, sub companies and sub brands that might not be big enough to have their own marketing team. Mm-hmm. They roll up to you and you service them. You're an agency. Yeah. You're an in-house agency, and you need to think like one. And I think thinking like one will also help you work with an agency as well.
Agreed. Everything is, you're reporting to a client, no matter if you're on the brand side or the agency side.
Yeah. And that was one of when I went from in-house to agency, I got a lot of questions from people that were like, you've never worked agency. You've only worked in-house for like 8 years. And I was like, I had more clients when I was an in-house person than you'll probably give me when I'm an agency. I'm right. Like, depending on the company, sometimes I had the CEO, the VP of marketing, the CFO, because I worked with them on customer service. I also had the CTO because I ran the website. And anytime there was a problem with the website or the leads propagating from form through Salesforce and into our back-end system, I had to go sit with the CTO, who was also my client. Like, I was like, I have all of these different clients. I know how it works.
Right.
But yeah, it's, but if you don't think about it like that, I think a lot of people are like, oh, well, we just have all these people requesting stuff. I'm like, yeah, because you're an agency.
So beyond doing the audit and figuring out who is going to do what, who has time to do what are some other best ways brands can ensure big wins with agency partnerships?
I think if you've done those things and you've thought through talking to an agency, one thing I've seen, at least on the digital side, a lot of agencies will bring out their best speaker, their best talker, their best salespeople. ask who's actually going to work on your account.
Mhm.
Are they bringing out their best person, and how much time of that best person who's selling you on their brain trust and their skills and what they can do actually meet and have, there was some agencies that hated my boss and I at one time, but we literally in every contract would tell them, the person that you brought out and the people that came out to us, we understand that, they're at a certain level. They're not going to spend all of their time on our account, but if they go, so does our contract. Or unless we agree with the next person, but we at least want them overseen and active on it. We understand They're not going to do 100%. We're realistic. But when someone brings out their top person who sells you on all this stuff, and then you get the junior person who just graduated college that does 95% of the work and doesn't actually understand what your business does or even like what they're doing, that can be a problem.
Why? You don't want to pay people to learn on the job?
Yes, but no. not with our small budget, or even your big budget. And yes, you understand that some of the some of the busy work from a project is going to go to a junior person. But I think a lot of times agencies will bring out their best people and then they never look at that account again.
Right.
And that's good and bad with the large. You get the large agency, they have a lot of people, but the larger the really large agencies, they have this team that goes around and they do all the selling and they do all the, might see them every quarter.
Right.
Maybe when they come by and say hello and shake your hand, but they haven't looked at your account other than on the plane ride.
Right. So where do you think some of the opportunities are to win big for brands and agencies to work together?
I think setting out a realistic plan, and if you've lining up your goals with the deliverables and with the scope and what's realistic in a timeline, as far as, if you're going for leads or sales or you're just launching a new site, if your internal people, have to review every single deliverable or every single creative created, don't expect that they're going to be able to turn around something in a week, because internally your own processes will get in the way. So I think being realistic with your own self and your own processes and being upfront with the agency and say, we really want to approve everything, but it's going to slow things down and we know it. How quickly can you move if we give you something? Right. So if we turn something around to you on a Wednesday, we know it always won't happen, but can we on a regular basis get things to us by that Monday so that we can review them and get back to you? And can that be a process? And I think having that kickoff meeting, have a kickoff meeting, one, but two, set realistic goals, let the agency know what the metrics are that you're measured by. And if they want to keep your business, this is what we need to do. We need to move the needle on these many units or on these products or on these services. This is what and how we will look good and how we'll make our boss look good and how we'll be able to give you more business.
Right. So I think the other thing on the opposite side for brands to know is that they need to limit the wild goose chases. Like if they haven't actually figured out what the dollar spend is for extra activations or to go different paths, they need to actually know what their budget range is versus sending their agencies out to go and dig in and find and unearth all these great opportunities that are then going to land on someone's desk back at the brand and go to literally die because the brand's like, oh, I don't really have any money to do any of these things.
Yeah, wild goose chases, or like I said earlier, just that we have this great idea. And it's like, okay, well, in this prioritization of all these deliverables to realistically hit these goals and to hit these milestones that you've set out in our kickoff meeting, they'll move.
Right.
Because of this wild goose chase. And they'll be like, oh, well, that's okay. Now we'll keep going. But they'll want you to keep going after the wild goose chase and then come back to you a week later. Like like I know you're probably nodding your head too. It's not going to work. We just talked to legal. We can't do it now. And it's like, well, we just spent a week and a half digging into this. Well, we'll just go back, but everything's pushed back a week and a half or 2 weeks now. Well, what do you mean? No, everything's still on time, right? No. We diverted all the resources and energy the last 2 weeks. We were going to hit that milestone, but now we've pushed it back 2 weeks.
Right.
And that's, communication, I think, just plain and simple, and understanding there's give and take, and, agencies to a certain point can try to make things up or do multiple things, but depending on the scope and the contract and, are you their biggest client or are you their smallest client? They might have a little bit of wiggle room. Are you working across, if it's a larger agency, are you working with multiple groups from that agency? If they're full service, are you using every service? Well, then maybe you can pull in, takes from different services within multiple contracts. Mm-hmm. But if you're just working with a single agency on one single line or one single thing, there is no other wiggle room. There's nothing you can pull from other than, another SOW.
Right.
Which no one wants to do, because then you have to go through multiple things.
Right. And go back to the whole contracting, which always takes time, and figuring it out.
Or even an additional, just, on top of this, we're just going to add another statement of work just for the next 3 months. Right. I'm like, okay, but some companies I've seen take a year to get that approved.
Right.
And sometimes I watched one for 2 years. Like, just the process to pick an agency took them almost 2 years. Yeah. And 6 months of it was getting the contract signed.
Sure.
And they were without an agency, I think, for about a year.
It's amazing how long legal teams can actually take to review contracts.
And then they wanted to launch a brand new site in less than 6 weeks.
Yes.
That they hadn't finished even building.
Yes, of course.
Yes.
I have experienced all of these things. And there's also the demoralization. So, you send your agency down all these paths, and you're expecting them to keep up with the other work. You're going down, these new ideas, and then nothing moves forward. And you end up with a team who isn't chomping at the bit at being your savior or leading the charge and, being as gung-ho after multiple times of the, full charge ahead, wait, stop. Full charge ahead, wait, stop.
Yeah. And as an agency, our job is to make you and your boss look good. Yeah. So that we'll either keep your business or we can grow it. Like, that's, as an agency person or even a consultant, for me, that's my goal is what are the goals? Let's hit them and exceed them. What are your boss's goals? Let's hit them and exceed them. Mm-hmm. With whatever budget we have, let's try to overdo and, hit any achievements and then some. Right. And as an in-house person, the agency's job is to make my life easier and to try to take something off my plate. And when all works well, it works nicely. But going back to the communication, that kickoff meeting, having the resources to implement things that your agency is suggesting or that a campaign calls for. I know we talked about it a little bit before, but if you're asking your agency to do X, Y, Z, make sure when you talk to them initially or get that contract that it includes all of the creative, all of the content. Right. If you own the CMS and the different technology stacks, is your IT team going to be able to keep up? Mm-hmm. Or you need to change or divert some of your campaigns and goals and processes, or not processes, but how you're going to approach and hit those goals.
Right. So are there any asks that you get from brands that in general just make you shudder and want to just immediately say no way and run for the hills?
I think when I'm asked to write a POV of some sort, or to basically take what my main contact, take an email or some document that my main contact has written and probably spent a year, sometimes even 3 years, promoting and trying to push through mm-hmm. the stakeholders and the blockades that there are. Mm-hmm. But when it comes from an agency, it suddenly is this gospel that we must follow. And this is what we've been looking for the last 2 years. When literally, and I've done this, I literally took my contact's email or document, added a little bit, changed some words, added some updating, and then sent it with our letterhead on it. And right. Suddenly it was this great thing. For me, that feels bad, because when you hire someone internally as an expert on whatever, so often they are not their role, but just, I think, whether it's a manager or woman, their role is you're the expert, but we don't believe you.
Right.
So we're going to hire this agency to tell us exactly what you just told us. But now you don't have any budget to do those other things because now we're paying this agency to tell us exactly what you told us. Mm-hmm. And I just feel it just makes it hard for that internal person, I think sometimes, not always, to, if they don't have the trust of their stakeholders and bosses and other teams, that they really know what they're talking about. As an agency, it becomes harder because then you have to spend more time convincing the other people that, one, they do, and that, two, you do. Because if they don't trust their opinion and their judgment, and they helped pick this agency, maybe there's a problem. But sometimes it has to come from the agency, that third party. I don't know why.
It's interesting because, yes, brands sometimes don't trust their guts, and they need to actually have that third party expert stamp of approval on it to make them feel like they're actually making the right decision, when many times they already are. And it's interesting also, we've started relationships with brands, and we've asked them for some very basic information and, understanding of who they think their brand is. And they've come back of basically having no idea and just wanting us to come up with who that brand is without any knowledge at all. And that's not fair to the agency either.
No. And you can only do so much. I'm asked often, most of my work is with SEO and PPC, and they're like, well, what keywords should we go after? I don't know. What do your clients call your product? Which keywords should we bid on? I'm like, I can do a lot of research into third-party tools and even dig into your own analytics and data, but I also need your knowledge.
Right.
And the number of times I go, well, how many times have you, if you're not the owner or a salesperson or customer service person, how often do you listen to those calls? What do you mean? Well, what are your prospects and customers, when they talk about your product or your business or, anything, how do they reference you? What do they call you? What do they like, or what do they complain about? And from that, I can get lots of ideas. But if you don't know, how am I supposed to know?
Right. And then on the absolute opposite of that, if you do task your agency to come up with the ideas and help you figure out your brand positioning and who you are, and they go down that path, you can't all of a sudden knee jerk, weeks and months in, and want to change directions completely on a whim.
But they will.
Oh, yeah.
They will. They'll decide that, I was working on a site migration, and a year and a half into it, that was only supposed to take a year. They decided that it came down from the powers that be, that they were going to do a rebranding, and that everything stopped. And some 6 months later, they finally launched some sort of MVP version of the site, but it was a 1-year project that a year and a half in had to stop everything and basically redo everything, because all of their taglines, all of their focus, everything changed. Mm-hmm. And I don't even know if my part of that project ever finished, because it was literally, I was supposed to work for 2 or 3 months on it at the very beginning. And literally a year in, I'd spent 20 hours total helping them with their SEO, because they were still a year in trying to figure out what the wireframes were going to look like.
Right.
For a site that was supposed to launch 8 months earlier.
Right. And in a case like that, they're actually harming sales and their own growth by taking such long-winded approaches versus just going and then adapting and going and then adapting. Some movement is better than no movement.
Yeah. Yeah. When it takes you as long to launch a new site as it takes for a major upgrade of that CMS, there's a problem. Right. When we started it, they were on one level of it. And by the time they launched, they were like, well, we actually have to redo a lot of stuff because that is now an old version of the CMS. And we've had to move it on to this brand new, has a lot of different things going on type of CMS. Right. That's how long it took for them to launch their site.
Sure.
And it probably happens more often than I wish it would, but that's how it works.
So where do you see brand and agency partnerships going in the future? Especially since there's such a DIY focus now by so many brands and so many instances of trying to do everything in-house to a degree.
Mm-hmm. I think it needs to be more of a partnership and relationship. And I think things will be more specialized than they have been. I don't know if it'll be, I know for some larger brands, it still makes sense to go and find that one agency that can do everything almost, or at least almost everything. Maybe not best in class everything, but at least the very specific things they really want them to be, they might be best in class. I think it'll move more to smaller and mid-size agencies that are very focused on one thing and very good at one thing. And it'll just be more of wrangling multiple smaller agencies, but that do very specific things. And it'll be campaign or product line based. And I know sometimes it is for, depending on where people work that are listening. But I think even the larger companies, and a lot of people I know are consultants, they've left other agencies and they're very specific in what they know and do. So if you have a very specific digital marketing problem, they are the person you go to, and they know every which way it could go and break. And that's what they focus on.
Right.
Because so many people now are building these large teams that can, quote unquote, do everything, but you only know what's happening in your little echo chamber, whether it's email, social, for certain, industries and things. And I think not all, but I think some people will move more towards very specific kind of specialties and who they hire.
And then I think beyond that, I think brands are going to need to start staffing a different type of personnel actually at the brand side to be a project manager, to kind of oversee all of these agencies and to be that hub and that central force that unites everyone. We started talking about that at the beginning of this podcast, where a lot of times agencies are, missing out on updates or not sharing things. And some brands expect the agencies just to share away. And agencies aren't always so great about working with other agencies, unfortunately. So you need that point person who is able to really, I would say herd cats to a degree.
Yes. I think the one thing I worked with I really didn't realize long ago that her job was a project manager. But that's really what she was. And she kind of oversaw large projects, but the way it worked is she was a stakeholder to me. So I never noticed it. But the one thing I missed in a lot of my other in-house positions was some sort of project manager that would oversee these really large projects. And sometimes I became it, or it was a committee, and that didn't always work because I was so busy doing work that you either busy doing work or trying to communicate, and I can't see every piece that's moving. One of the best things I ever did was work with some really awesome project managers when I worked at a larger agency. And oh my God, I love them every day. And every so often now I will hit them up on Facebook or Instagram or text them if I'm down in the city, and I just ping them and go, I miss you, because they're so awesome. And I think more internal teams should just do training, or to a certain extent, hire a project manager. To, like you said, just the communication and all those moving parts, especially at a larger company. I've seen it, but I think the more mid-sized, even smaller companies really need someone that is a communications kind of account manager, project manager type person that sees the whole picture and isn't in any of the weeds. So if anything is slowing down, it's just their job to go, hey, so-and-so, you're behind. We need to, do you need resources? Do we need to sit down with all these different people? And I think more and more small to mid-sized companies really should be putting those on to their marketing teams.
Right. And knowing that, they're hiring multiple agencies of specialty niches.
Oh, yeah.
But it's a cost savings still overall by being able to have that person, because otherwise you're having a lot of people spinning wheels.
And as an agent or as an in-house team grows and you start getting siloed into your own, either you're working on specific products or brands or business lines, you're kind of in your own little thing. You might not know that another team is working with that same agency, but maybe different people from that agency, and that there's some sharing that can go on. For some project managers that might know more things that are going on, or someone just higher up, you would hope that they would be like, hey, there's all sorts of moving parts, but you guys actually are working on some of the exact same things. going after some of the same type of, you're both going after the same customers with different pitches. And then it makes your company look bad because someone's getting an email blast from brand C, and also they're getting very similar ones from brand D, which is actually owned by the same company. And, the teams sit 20 feet apart.
There's not a lot of differentiation there.
No.
Well, do you have any last bits of advice that you want to share with our listeners today on how to make these partnerships and these relationships even better?
If you're an in-house team, think like an agency. If you're an agency, think like an in-house team. Try to, have a little empathy for the other side and what they go through. As agency people, we probably sit in a lot of internal meetings where we're just like, how do you guys ever get anything done? Because I've sat in on those. And if you're an in-house person and you want resources or you want to hire an agency to do something, but your boss tells you there's no budget, what I found to be awesome as a tool for winning that argument is use some sort of tool to manage your time.
Right.
So use, there's all sorts of free tools out there. And even though you're saying, your office is telling you how many meetings you're in, document and almost track all of your time for a week. I once turned it in because I was running SEO and I told them that I needed a third party to help me do link building and do XYZ and help me with all these different things. And my boss was like, we don't have budget. I literally tracked myself for a week and then I gave it to him and I said, here's how much time I spent on customer service. Here's how much time I spent in meetings with IT. Here's how much time I did XYZ. And here's how much time I actually spent on SEO. Out of my 40 hours that week, I think I spent 3 or 4.
Right.
And he was like, that's your job. I go, I know it is, but I'm doing all these other things. 2 weeks later, I was getting to interview agencies to help me because he's like, I can't change any of this other stuff and I can't give any of it to anyone else. And suddenly 2 weeks later, he found me some budget.
Right. No, I think that is one of the most valuable tools that I try to do a couple of times a year, actually, where I take a week, and it's so dreadful, even as an agency owner, to do that. You ask your team to track their time, track their projects, but as an owner, we don't always do that so well. And it's really enlightening to see where things come up that you can either give away to give to other people, or where you do need to hire on and find some more help.
Yeah. I used to track my own internal time for my own promotion, and I stopped, and I probably should do that. But I track my time for everything else. So I just assume that anything that I didn't track is kind of that way. But it is really eye-opening when you sit down and you realize you think you're in a lot of meetings and sometimes you're not, but it just feels that way. And other times you really are in like 5 different things that you aren't even supposed to be doing that have nothing to do with your goals or your team's goals. And that's when you can also bring it up to your boss or your boss's boss or other team members and say, hey, I've been helping you a lot with this project. I just realized that I'm not spending much time on my own. And I have all these other things and I could be doing more from your own career, your team's goals. I think it'll help everyone.
Absolutely agree. Now, do you want to share more details about your podcast and a little bit more about your company and how people can actually find you and get in contact with you so they can do all things of working with you as an agency for their brand?
So my agency is just me, myself, and I. It's just me. I'm working on my work-life balance right now, so I'm able to spend a little time with the kiddos. So it's northsidemetrics.com. I'm here in Chicago, but I have clients right now all over the U.S. I think one in Canada, of all different sizes. The podcast is the business of digital. So it's business_of.digital. The Twitter account is @bizofdigital. I had the same problem that you were talking about with yours. So we went BIZ of digital. And the podcast, we're on number 80 or so. I forget where we're at right now, but we talk about small business or people starting out. And we do talk about some Fortune 50 type larger issues, but it's all about anything digital marketing. We kind of cover the gambit. Sometimes we go really deep, but sometimes it's usually just a little bit high level, and it's 20 minutes and we cut right to the chase. So if you have a short drive or, jumping on a treadmill, it's kind of our goal.
Well, awesome. Dave, thank you so much for joining us today. I really enjoyed listening to you thinking about things that we can change at our own agency and with brand relationships as well. And I look forward to staying in contact and continuing the conversation.
Thank you for having me.